Hi everyone, I think I've got quite a few of you now on the webinar, and we will make a short start. So we do have Andrew Bremner with us today, and we were also meant to have Mike Colbert join us, but I think he's having a few issues coming onto the call, so I will just make a start. Before I do hand over to our speaker, Andrew, I will just go over a few housekeeping things during the call, just for you to bear in mind. So I think you're all kind of connected to audio now if you can hear me. If you can't, I think we would have already flagged it, but it seems like everyone's connected at the moment. If you do have any connectivity issues during the webinar, I would recommend calling in to kind of connect to the audio rather than using your PC. And if you're using any other platforms on your laptop or your machine, like Netflix, YouTube, just be wary that that could slow down your connection as well. We are also recording the session, so we'll be circulating that to you after the webinar is over, and there will be an opportunity to do a Q&A at the end of the session too. And finally, you probably noticed that you are on mute during this call and you won't be able to put your videos on, but we do have the chat function and the Q&A on the right-hand side for you to engage with us. So the Q&A box is just on the bottom, and drop any questions you might have into there, and we'll ask the speakers about those. And then if you have any comments, please use the chat box and the feedback function that you should be able to see on the right-hand side is a little speaker icon. Please just use that to provide any feedback when the speakers request it. And I will now hand over to Andrew to begin.
Thank you. So I'm just waiting for to be able to share the content. There we go.
Did it come through?
Yes, it has. Yeah. Okay. So now I should be able to. Oops. Start. And I'll be right with you. Okay. So thanks very much for coming along. I'll just give you a bit of an outline of what we're going to cover today. So I'm an author with McGraw-Hill, and I've been involved in a couple of textbooks in the psychology field, and I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the kinds of things that we try to do with those textbooks to engage students and to give them a good learning experience, and talk a bit about the kinds of challenges that we're all facing at the moment in the context of the global pandemic, and how we might respond to the challenges which are raised by that by bringing our materials online. And then after me, I hope that we'll have Mike Colbert with us, who's going to be able to take us through all the online facilities which McGraw-Hill offer through the Connect platform, which I would hope would be very helpful for many of you in tackling the current situation that we're all in. And then we'll have questions and answers at the end. So moving straight on, I guess the thing which I wanted to talk about was really the kinds of pedagogical challenges that we face. Now, the challenges that we face under the pandemic are really just an extension or sharp relief, basically, of the kinds of pedagogical challenges that we face in everyday teaching and face-to-face teaching with our students. We want to engage our students and help them understand the relevance of what we're teaching them about psychology to real life and to their employability. And of course, now students pay fees in the UK. It's more and more the case that they expect to be engaged. They expect to be almost entertained. So, you know, that's more and more an important focus for us in delivering the kinds of education which students expect. One which I expect many of you will be very familiar with, intimately familiar with, and probably frustrated with, is we have to spend a lot of time trying to persuade students that they're at university not just to be taught content and to learn facts, but to learn to think for themselves. It's more and more the case, certainly over the 15 years of teaching experience that I've had, that students arrive at university almost expecting to be fed the questions that they need to know in order to be able to answer the questions in the exams which they'll be presented. It's almost a misapprehension of the purpose of what we're doing, and of course it's a bit of a conflict given that we ourselves set the exam papers that we're going to be testing the students on. So a lot of what we try to do in teaching, and also of course in textbooks, is to try to prompt students into ways of thinking where they learn to think for themselves and to engage their critical analytical skills in thinking about psychology. And of course, we're all in the sector having to do with this with increasingly limited resources, and I suspect that that's going to get even worse in the years to come as we enter a global recession, and there's a lot of challenges for universities in the sector with the upcoming limitations in international numbers, which many universities are going to see as a result of COVID. So all of these points are going to put a great deal of pressure on us to find increasingly creative ways to be able to do these things with limited time, with limited staffing and equipment resources. I hope that doesn't sound too depressing, but I guess that's where we are. So I guess it would be useful to talk a little bit about the ways in which we try to achieve those things in the textbooks which I've published. So I've been involved in two textbooks with McGraw-Hill as part of quite large author teams. Both of those textbooks are actually adapted from successful American textbooks. The first by Passer and Smith. We're actually now on the fourth European edition of that, which is I and Nigel Holt, Michael Vleek, and Ed Sutherland have been involved in adapting that book for an EU UK audience, and it's been a successful textbook, and in many ways it doesn't really resemble very much anymore the original American textbook, but we've developed all sorts of pedagogical facilities in that book for engaging students. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. I've also been involved with Patrick Leman in a Developmental Psychology textbook, which is also an adaptation of a successful American textbook by Ross Park and Mary Govain. And Patrick and I have now done the second edition of that, so I'll talk about that in a bit as well. So the Holt et al. Textbook is really an intro to psychology textbook covering the broad domain of psychology, and it's meant as an access point really for undergraduate students into the field of psychology, covering it in its entirety. As I mentioned, it was a US book originally, but we've adapted it to the UK context, and we're now in the fourth edition of the UK EU version. So I guess some of the important features of that book, which are important, I think, for engaging students and for delivering a good university education, are the consideration of contemporary themes. So some of the things which we included for the most recent edition were things like mindfulness, political upheaval, psychological thought about obedience, which is obviously a very old theme, but it's particularly relevant at the moment, and things like the anti-vax movement. We're also, as is in line with contemporary approaches to education in higher education, we're also increasing focus on employability and how students can learn about the routes which one can take through psychology to employability after post-graduation. In line with those goals which I mentioned at the start about trying to deliver good, high-quality education, we include a range of pedagogical features in the book. Many of these are directed at trying to get students to start to think for themselves. Obviously, this textbook's really meant for first-year entry level, so this is the first steps which students be taking post-A level, at starting to think for themselves and come up with their own ideas. And we're really trying to just sort of tease them into those kinds of ways of thinking through these various pedagogical features that we use. So we get them to think about how psychological science might be applied, whether that works or not. We have a box on applying psychology in each of the chapters in the book. We have research close-ups, getting them to focus on a specific experiment that's important in the particular chapter that they're reading. We focus on current issues, so getting them engaged in the kinds of current debates which are going on in the field, but also in line with that, focus on employability, prompting them to think about how psychology works in the workplace. But also, again, given the importance of trying to get them to think for themselves and to think critically and analytically about the discipline, I think you probably agree that the open science movement that we're seeing in the field of psychology and more widely in recent years has provided a really nice opportunity to get students engaged in critique of scientific work and analysing and trying to understand what the best approaches and methods are for yielding good science. So that's been an emphasis in that book. The Developmental Psychology book, which I've worked with Patrick Leman, that's more of an intermediate level textbook. It's meant as an introduction to developmental psychology, possibly at year 1 or year 2 BSc level. The coverage in it, as befits trying to get students engaged in the literature and to think critically at the forefront of the literature, we try to make sure that the content reflects current areas of focus in the field. So we've brought up to date particular areas where there is a lot of current debate, such as in complex developmental models of teratogenesis, behavioral genetics, developmental neuroscience, multisensory development, social cognitive development, executive functions, and also the application of the latest diagnostic criteria in atypical development. Those are just a range of examples of the ways in which we're trying to make sure that the content in the book reflects current understanding in the literature and current debates in literature. And I think that's important if you can persuade students that they're learning about the forefront of the field, then they get a lot more sense of their own ability to think critically and to understand the field in a self-possessed way. So again, there's a set of pedagogical features that we use to try to engage students in thinking for themselves. There's the applied developmental psychology boxes that we have, which are rather like those used in Holt et al. We also have research close-up and explore and discuss sections. And again, there's also an important focus on replication and open science and the changes to the field which those are creating. So there's a strong methodological approach where we think about the ways in which the science has been studied empirically. So yeah, just as an example of that, I mean, this is an area which is kind of close to my heart because I do research on multisensory development in infants. So in the sensory development chapter in that developmental book, we make a point of pointing out that infants aren't just visual creatures. So most of the research up until this point has really looked at how infants perceive the visual world, but more and more that kind of approach is being undermined by people realizing, well, of course, they use other senses as well, such as smell and touch. And that's an important aspect of that chapter. It's really the key focus of how we study perceptual development in the chapter in that textbook, because that provides a nice critical point that students can make when trying to discuss how perceptual development should be studied. Okay, so that's just going through a couple of the textbooks which I've been involved in. So what are these pedagogical challenges that we have in the time of the pandemic that we're in? Well, I guess I imagine that many of you are experiencing some similar challenges that I'm having in my university. So I'm the head of education in the School of Psychology at the University of Birmingham. And our vice chancellor the other day actually sent a YouTube video out to all of the students and told them this is before we really knew anything about this. He told them all that all the teaching would be both face-to-face and online next year. So that's going to be presenting us with somewhat of a challenge before September. And so what we're going to have to do is to think about how we can better teach students in an online context. And of course, many of us will have a bit of experience of teaching online, so recording lectures and presenting them on virtual learning environments. But there are lots and lots of ways of interacting with students online at a distance, and these aren't necessarily straightforward to use. And I think that there's such a wide variety of choice that it's going to be difficult to come up with a really good template for how we should present research and educational experiences to students in an online format. So one of the ways I've been trying to think of it is, what are the things that we do in face-to-face teaching that we're going to need to bring onto line? What are the necessary ingredients of face-to-face teaching, and how do we translate them online? So if you think through a lecture that you give to undergraduate students, and there's an awful lot goes on there, much of which we take for granted. So at the start of the course, we explain all of the requirements of a particular course to students. We, of course, convey the material that we're trying to teach them. We're trying to engage their interest. We're trying to engage their critical thinking, as we've been talking about. But we're also often trying to judge understanding, and that can often come through implicit social cues. So I'm often asking students in lectures, is that clear? Did you understand that? And I sort of look out for little nods in the room. That's much more difficult to get in an online format. So it's really difficult. We have to think through the ways in which we're going to sort of fill those gaps. Asking and answering questions, of course, is really important. So we need to find ways of doing that online. Testing knowledge, responding to queries, reassuring and reinforcing, facilitating appropriate peer interactions. And the list can go on and on, really. There's an awful lot that we do in lectures. So what are the ways in which we're going to be solving that? Well, I mean, the list can go on, and it's a bit intimidating, but of course, many of you will have lots of experience of this already. But of course, flipped classroom approaches are going to be probably quite important. So recording materials prior to presenting them to the students, and then follow those up with more interactive sessions where you discuss what's been presented to them so far. Judging knowledge through interactive and exploratory activities, through quizzes and polling, getting students to engage with the material through interactive and exploratory activities online, tracking student knowledge. And I think we need to think, how we're going to coordinate peer interactive work in small groups. That's a really important aspect of university education, is interacting with those who are also learning alongside you rather than just the teachers. So there's an awful lot that we're going to have to do, and I think one of the benefits, hopefully, of coming to this meeting today is that you might get a chance to learn about the Connect platform, which McGraw-Hill is provides alongside the textbooks which the students have. And I think there's an awful lot of these provisions that we need to make are going to be covered by that. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to hand over to Mike Colbert now, who will be able to pick up on that. So I'm just going to hand back, if I can find my way around. Okay. So is V or Afsana there?
Hi, yeah.
I'll pass back over then, if that's okay, or should we answer questions and answers now?
I think Mike's joined on the call. Mike, are you able to share your screen? Just a moment, I'll figure out what.
There's a nice question from Geeta just here that I can answer whilst Mike's getting ready. So Geeta's asked, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you face in the move to online? So I think I think it's the intangible aspects that we have when students interact with each other and we interact with students. So obviously, students, rather than being sitting next to each other or working in groups and conferring with each other and us, they're going to be at home. They're going to be finding it difficult to stay engaged because you don't have that social facilitation. So I think one of the biggest challenges and one of the most important ways that we need to get students involved is by somehow facilitating those social interactions which really hold educational contexts together. Some of that I think will have to be structural. So I suspect we're going to have to be setting students into groups so that they can phone each other up on Zoom or whatever and have a discussion about a particular topic which they're meant to be doing. And some of it's going to be through discussion boards or through requiring students to engage with classwork. Some, in the past where students have been face to face, it's probably been reasonably easy just to try to prompt everyone into getting involved in class material. But where people are at home and you can't necessarily see them, I think we're going to have to be a little bit more prescriptive that they actually get involved in classrooms activities.
Hi, Mike. I don't know whether we can do a quick sound check so you can hear us. No, it's not coming through. I will just stop them know and see what's going on.
So Joe McDonough has asked, do you think it's good to have a traditional 1 hour lecture, or do you think that less is more for online lectures? So I still haven't made up my mind up about this. So I think covering content online, I think less is more. But in terms of facilitating interactions between students, I think, in line with what I just said in response to Geeta's question, I think in a way, spending more time with facilitating interactions is probably going to be important. So I guess maybe a 1 hour lecture might translate to me into perhaps half an hour, 45 minutes of delivery, of didactic delivery, where the students aren't necessarily responding at all, but then perhaps longer, half an hour, another half an hour on top of that, facilitating discussions and getting students engaged. So I think we're going to need to spend more time prodding students into engaging with the material and responding to us. Otherwise, they could end up being extremely passive and sat at home. That's really just my guess. So I don't feel extremely expert in this because I haven't done a lot of distance learning, for instance, provision. So Christine said, is there some sort of VC-specific virus going around at the moment that means they compulsively make YouTube announcements to the entire student body without talking to academic staff first? Hope they find a vaccine soon. I couldn't agree more, yeah. Could really do with a bit of support from from above at the moment. And Ahmed Bendania has asked, my question is, should we go the same way as lecturing in class, or rather do we have to restructure the whole process of teaching? I think that's really a question for resourcing. It depends on what other things you have to do. It'll depend on the level at which the university is resourcing your time. I know there are some universities out there quite helpfully advising staff that what they should do in the context is prepare for delivering lectures as they would have done, but in an online way, followed by online interactions with students. So that's quite a helpful approach for universities, because it means that we can deliver the materials that we previously have had, and we normally would deliver face to face, but just in an online platform. That means that it will give us a bit of time to start to actually devote to developing these more interactive aspects, which are going to be more important in reining students into the conversations. So I think there's an important job for universities with the limited resources that we're going to be having, in making sure that they're not piling huge amounts of work onto staff and expecting everything to be perfect in the first moments of term in September, October. Giving us the space to deliver teaching in the way that we would have done previously, but should give us the time to enhance the online aspects as we move through the year. I don't, everyone's been taken unawares by this pandemic, and I don't think we can be expected to come up with a perfect model from the start in September. Joe's asked, how much do you think it's reasonable to ask students to do between lectures? For example, a chapter a week or between lectures? Well, I try to set students a couple of things to read. A chapter from a textbook, I think is the kind of basic requirement. I often try to get them to read an article on top of that, usually a short one if I can make it, a short and simple empirical article. I guess it depends on the year of study. If I'm teaching a second year developmental class, I think I would go for a chapter a week plus one or two empirical articles to take a look at, short ones. If it's third year, then I might get a bit more involved and push them a bit harder. Maybe three papers to read as well as a chapter. That's my preference, though, and I can't say that they all do the reading. So. Any more questions at all?
Hi, Andrew. I'm just wondering, I think we're trying to check mics, if his mic is up and running. I think we're having a few technical issues.
Yeah.
So I will just give a few minutes to kind of get that sorted. If there are any more questions that are for you, feel free to drop any more questions in the chat box for the Q&A, and we'll get those answered.
So Geeta's asked, how are you planning for autumn, fall 2020 teaching where you are? I guess that's a question for me. At the moment, the university is still really making up its mind. In a way, we quite like to be told what to do. We'd like the higher, the managerial education team in the university to come up with a model and say this is what you have to do. Partly because that makes it easier to organise people's work in the department. At the same time, we don't want them to ask too much. So in line with some of the responses I've been making to previous questions, what we don't want is the university to say, well, you have to have a perfect online distance learning teaching model ready to go from the start of September. Something a bit more helpful along the lines of, well, deliver it online as you would have done face-to-face and develop the interactive activities through the year as you go would be a little bit more helpful. But in a way, it really depends on the extent to which your university is dictatorial in these kinds of matters. Birmingham is quite autocratic. There tends to be quite a strong line coming down from the Pro-Vice Chancellor Education about how things should be done. So in a way, I'm kind of waiting to hear what that will be. I think it feels to me that we should be quite ready just to start delivering lectures online, and indeed we did quite a lot of that at the end of the second semester as the pandemic was setting in. And so I'm not so worried about lecture delivery, but of course I'm worried about students becoming disengaged as the term goes on because they don't have those rich face-to-face interactions which they otherwise would have had. And you start to worry that it's going to be difficult to keep track of individual students where they're not engaging as they normally would have done. The things which I'm really worrying about are really research methods teaching and project supervision. So project supervision is going to be very difficult to do, partly because we're not going to be able to test participants face to face. It seems extremely unlikely that we're going to be able to test participants face to face. So we either have to move our research to online data collection, or we have to look at secondary data sets or meta-analyses. So at the moment, what we're trying to do in Birmingham is understand from our staff how they feel they can put research project supervision into a format which we'll be able to run during the pandemic, and without face-to-face participant testing. Some will have ready solutions to that. Others are going to find that much more difficult to do, depending on the research areas that they're in. And so I think we need to fund training to support people to put things online where that's appropriate, or we may need to resource participant data collection in a different way, for example, through Mechanical Turk or Prolific. So Joe says, what are your views about assignments and examinations in a time when traditional sit-down exams may not be possible? How good do you think Connect is for that? Well, I'm really waiting for Mike to come along to talk about Connect, because he's much more expert in it than me. I've hardly used it, I have to admit, partly because that's just the way the university runs where I am. What my views about assignments and examinations in a time when traditional sit-down exams might not be possible. Can you hear me? Hi, is that Mike?
Yes, finally. Hey, Andy.
Hi, well done, Mike.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'll just finish answering this question, but I think that might be a good point at which for you to take over. So I've been asked what are your views about assignments and examinations in a time when traditional sit-down exams might not be possible. So in Birmingham, we've cancelled all our exams this year, and we've replaced it all. We're requiring less for students to be able to graduate and progress than we would in a normal year. And we've replaced exams where students need a little bit more to get the credits they need to graduate with essentially coursework assessments. Now, coursework assessment is good, and of course we use coursework assessment through a lot of the programs in our across the UK. The psychology programs now have lots of coursework in them. That's been a change since 10 years ago, when there was a lot more emphasis on exams. But one of the problems with coursework, of course, is that we're never quite sure whether it's the student's own work, and it also tests different kinds of skills to exams. So my personal preference is for a mixture of coursework and exam. So in a time when exams aren't going to be possible, we're going to have to find better ways to get at those kinds of things. So it is possible to run exams, so timed exams, and to test students' memory for knowledge in an online format. So we can run timed multiple choice tests, for instance, which will make it difficult for students to go and research the answers on their phones and things like that. But they're not, they're not as fail-safe as the online situation. So it's going to be a difficult challenge to navigate. Mike, shall I hand over to you now?
Okay, I'm just trying to see how I can share my screen.
Hi, Mike. Do you see the little icon with the square and the arrow pointing up on the bottom? Should be able to share your content using
with the
that.
3 dots?
Yeah. Has it popped up?
Yep. It just says audio and speaker.
Okay, just a second. What I can do is I can share it from my machine, and then that should be able to.
Okay.
You should be able to control it from there.
So Pilarine Seekers just asked, he appreciates any clues on how to get students engaged in online discussions. So I'm in a similar position. I'm still very new to this myself and still figuring it out. I guess what I'm considering, one of the things I'm considering, is trying to make compulsory some kind of interaction. So requiring that students each submit some kind of comment on what we've been discussing. That might be one approach. I'll be interested if maybe people might want to add things in the chat about the kinds of tips and ideas that they have.
Okay, am I coming through okay?
Yes, that's great.
All right, so I apologize, everyone. I was able to hear Andy and see everything. You just weren't able to see me or hear me. Andy touched on a lot of great things. One of the things I wanted to show you is that with Connect, you can build an entire course. Andy went through some of the difficulties or the concerns that we have now transitioning to online. What I was talking about with my faculty is, how do you build a course without jeopardizing the academic integrity? And on the other hand, how do you build a course that you don't overload the students where they're not really gaining anything? It's just a whole bunch of work. The beauty with Connect is that there's so much embedded in there that you can build this course, give them everything which Andy referred to as the flipped classroom. You can create essentially everything you do in the classroom online and then figure out a way to connect with them. My first slide here, and I'm going to keep this a lot shorter than I was going to do, but at my college in New Jersey, I was very skeptical of the claims that McGraw-Hill was given about Connect will raise students' grades, at least a letter grade, if they're using it. And I love Connect as a professor. So what I did in one of my classes, I had some of the students use Connect and some did not. And at the end of the semester, I compared the grades. And sure enough, I found that the students that used Connect did indeed score one letter grade higher than the rest of the class. So I was sold. In using it over the years, I ended up rolling it out as department chair across the board. So for our intro class and our developmental psychology class, this is a mandatory part of using into the classroom. So some of the advantages, and you know, when I'm talking about my department and the adjunct, the very first thing they want to know is this going to create extra work for me? How hard is this? And I got to tell you, it is very simple. And I'm going to show you all the components of it today. But the other piece is somebody can build the course and just share it to the whole department. And then you can, you know, tailor it to your own needs. So the access is very easy, very comprehensive as far as the options you have. So this is what I was talking about copying. What I do is I build a department shell, and then I copy it out to my faculty. And then what they do is tailor it to what they want. You know, they can add a little bit more, but I give them the bare minimum of what they need. So I set the whole thing up for them. It's really that simple. For the students logging on, you can customize the URL that they're going to use. You can see here the second part of it. I have the best developmental professor, Fall 20. They just click on that and it brings them right in. If you're using an online platform, at our school we use Canvas. You see the red arrow there. You bring the MH Connect tab. Students click on that and you sync it right to your Connect course. So again, access into this is very easy. Students can use it on a tablet, on their phone. And when they get there, this is just a welcome page for the students. They type their email in here. It asks them maybe 3 questions, and then they're into the assignments. As far as what does Connect offer? Here's a list of all the things. What I did is I used Andy's developmental textbook, and I went into his course, and I built a little shell around his textbook. And these are all the options available So I'm going to go through each one. This one, I believe, is the backbone to connect. I think every professor should be using this. This, in some of it is called Smart Book. In some of my accounts, it has it as LS, Learn Smart. Smart Book is the digital textbook that allows the students to read the book and answer questions. So you'll see there's a question here. When they answer the question, there's a confidence level. In that confidence level, it asks them high, medium, or low. This is going to give you a metacognitive report, which is really helpful for you and students that may be struggling. You can bring them into an office hour, talk to them a little bit about, hey, it looks like you're guessing, or it looks like you're really unsure of yourself. That's a nice feature that's built into the Learn Smart. But this is Smart Book, so when they answer questions, it will highlight or unhighlight the textbook. So you'll see if you look around on this PowerPoint slide, on the bottom right, there's reading, so they can click reading and automatically the digital textbook pops up. If they're unsure about the question, where it says concept resources, they click there and it opens them up to the page where the answer is. My biggest concern was that students were not reading the textbook. So how can I ensure that not only my lectures, but students were getting information from the textbook? This assignment right here does that. They have to answer the questions. They don't know it. They open up the book. They read the book. They answer it. And then what happens is the Smart Book will individualize the reading, and it unhighlights or turns the highlight to a different color once they've mastered concepts. So again, I think this minimally is a great, great tool to supplement any of the textbooks. As the instructor, you get to pick what content you want in that assignment. So here's an example from Andy's book, Chapter 2, Theories in Development. You'll get to pick, if you want all of these, you'll see how many questions there are and how many the students need to complete. And then the bar on the far right allows you to make the slide. That's the time limit that, it's not a time limit, it's how much time the students should take based on the number of questions you're putting in. So if you move the slide rule higher, it's going to add more questions in. If you move the slide rule down, it takes questions away. So you dictate how long you want them to spend on this. And I assign this for every chapter prior to them taking the exam. You can even have them do this prior to a lecture. This way it promotes higher level learning and higher level question dialogue in the classroom because they've been exposed to the material outside of the classroom, that flipped classroom concept. Other things within, again, some of this is just for developmental psychology. So those of you that maybe teach an intro or some other courses, this here Quest, this is specific to developmental psychology. And this is brand new. So you'll see here are all the characters in this Quest game. And what I did is I just took one of them, the military base Martinez, and I clicked on him, and you'll see all of the developmental theory and concepts that are involved in this game. So students will get on, they'll start navigating through, bringing the character to the different scenarios, and then they're completing the task. In doing so, you're exposing them to theory and concepts in sort of real-life scenarios through all of these. Andy had mentioned about a paper. You know, he recommended a chapter a week and maybe a paper. Power of Process is a great way to assign a professionally published peer-reviewed paper and have the students navigate it in a very easy manner. You know, students lots of times, number one, they go to the wrong sources to get professional papers. And then when you give them a professional paper, they don't know how to dissect it. They don't know how to go through it. Power of Process has a number of professionally published articles already in the program. So you see on the side there all the topics. I just happen to go to human development, check middle adulthood, and they're the two articles that are in Power of Process for this one. So I picked the midlife health in British women. And then it has a whole bunch of directives that you can give to the students. So you see, I put consider the title. So I want them to look at the title and tell me what they think the article is going to involve. You'll see the wheel on the left. Each time you pick one of these, it creates the wheel. That's the assignment for the students. So when they get on, they're going to work around the wheel and answer the questions that you want them to take from the article. You can even put up your own questions in here and add them into the wheel. So one of the questions I have, read the abstract. So based on the abstract, what do you think you'll find in the article? They'll type their response in the box, and they'll save it, and they'll continue around the wheel until they complete the entire assignment. And then I can see all of their responses put together at the end. So again, information literacy, this is a great way to embed that into your course and have students navigate a professionally published article. Then there's a number of application-based activities. Some are role-playing, some are matching. You see on the side there, you get to pick all those different ones that are preset. I pick one here, it's sleep stages, and it's just matching. So all the gray arrows on your side, you can go through. So it has N1, N2, N3, has the REM sleep, has awake. So whatever one you set on the top one, then you have to match all the descriptions going through. So again, just a nice way to test their knowledge on this. And lots of these assignments, all of these assignments are completion. Unless you set up an exam where it's actually correctness, the nice thing here is that students are getting credit just for doing the assignment. Milestones is another great feature that added a few years ago. This is fairly new also. Here's the nice thing about milestones. These are really short videos. Now, sometimes assigning a video that's a half hour, an hour, students aren't going to sit and watch the whole thing. These are just a couple of minutes. I think this one here is it's a minute 25. So each one, it will bring you through a real life scenario, and it's going to show you the pre-milestone, so what it looks like when the child or the baby, depending on the age, cannot achieve that milestone, and why. Then it's going to move you into when they actually achieve it, and each one's going to give you a quick question. And then it'll show you after they achieve it as they're moving on. So that's called milestones. So leading up to this, again, you've got all of these sort of practice pieces that you can build your course in Connect. You can have them read the book, obviously with SmartBook, do the Learn Smart questions. You got the interactives, you got the quest game, you got videos, and then here are your exams. So you can set up an exam right here in Connect. And what I love about this are all the options. So if you go through all of the two slides here on the left and right columns, you can set how many questions go into the exam. You can even do multiple exams if you want. You can do a chapter exam or maybe chapters 1 through 3 and pull the questions together. So you give them how many questions, how long you want them to do it, whether or not you want them to print the exam, whether or not you want them to be able to have tabs open, how many chances they're going to take on this. And then when they take the exam, let's say you give them 2 chances, do you want them to get a feedback? Do you want them to see the answers before they take the next one? Do you want the next exam to be the same exact exam? Or do you want it to pull from the larger number of questions so they get a whole new exam? A lot of good features here. And my students, when we transitioned in, I built my exams to finish the spring semester, and it was very, very smooth. And if you're using an online platform like Canvas or Blackboard, this drops right into your gradebook. So that's the beauty of it, too. Not only is it all set up and the monitoring of it, but it goes right into the gradebook. So you don't even have to grade anything. Power of Process, you're going to have to grade their responses. But everything else is graded and dropped in your gradebook for you. So it's really easy to use for both the students and the professors. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to log in because of how we're doing this and show my screen, but I wanted to demo a few things for you, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. Sana, or is somebody that V, am I able to show anything? If not, we can just take questions on all of the components that I showed you.
Hi, Mike. Are you still not able to use the share screen function? You're just on mute at the moment, I think.
Where am I looking? Because I only see some icons at the bottom, and none of them are giving me the option. Wait, here we go. Did that do it?
It works? It should be the third icon from the left.
It reverted to my screen. I'm not sure if you see it.
It should be just below the PowerPoint slide set of icons. And maybe try the three dots on the end, where it gives you more options.
Open system preferences, and it does revert to my screen, but I guess you're not seeing it.
I'm not sure, so you should be able to use the share screen icon function. It's usually on the bottom.
Right here.
What icons can you see along the bottom if you just... Oh, yeah, there we go.
Is that right?
Perfect. Yep, you can see your screen.
Okay. And so once you build the course, this is what it would look like. So what I did is I just made a bunch of clusters of everything I just showed you. So if you just want to assign a reading, you do add assignment, you drop it in here. So this just brings them to the book to read. The Smart Book, these are the assignments that I was showing you, and I want to demonstrate that for you in just a second. Here are some of the quest assignments. So I just put them in groups here. And what you can do, let's say this is a 6-week course. So week 1, I want them to read chapter 1. So I take this, and I'll just drop it right into week 1. Let's say I want them to do the Smart Book reading. I want them to do a quest. And so you see what I'm doing here. I'm just dropping everything into week 1. Then I can set these dates. Students log on, and they just work right through the tabs. So let me show you what I think is one of the best assignments on here. So this is the Smart Book Learn Smart. All right, so they can read or they can do the questions. So here's the question. You see at the top, that slide rule that I was showed you earlier, I put it at 27 concepts here. All right, so they want to get this all the way to the end, and then they're done. So this is a completion grade, not a correctness grade. So whenever you have a question that says select all that apply, there's more than one answer. All right, so let's see if we can... and then I say it's high, and no, so I got it right, and I go to the next question. So you see I got one concept now complete. Let's say this one, I don't know the answer to it. So I'll open the book, and it brings me, whoops, let me go back there. It brings me right to the page that I need to read. And then I'll go back to my questions, and I'll answer the question. Now, let's enter this wrong. It says it's wrong, and now it shows me the answer. However, this bar at the top is not going to move. So students are still going to have to answer either this question or another question related to this concept before they can move on. Right? So then you go to the next question. So you'll see some of them are fill in the blank, some of them are multiple choice. There are even some matching that's on here. Again, let's get this one wrong. I'll put Andy's name in here. Right? So it's wrong. It tells me the answer, and then I keep moving. Now, this one here, you see the red at the bottom? It says that I got some questions wrong. If you get a number of questions wrong with one concept, it's going to stop you and tell you that you really should open the book and start reading. Now, students can spend 1 minute in here or an hour in here. As soon as they feel comfortable, now they go back to their questions and they go to the next slide. So I don't know if there's other things you want me to show you, but I really want you to see the Smart Book assignment, because as a flipped classroom, whether you're doing this live or you have to go totally online, this is a great supplement to any of the textbooks. I don't know. I can't see if there's any questions coming in.
Hi, so we've got a couple of questions that have come in. I'll just read them out. So the first one is, how do you see the balance between books and fully online learning materials such as micro-lectures, lectures with interactive assignments, in, for example, flipped classroom, especially now that everything goes by a computer screen? It seems more books become more absolute.
Can you repeat that one time? I had a lot of background.
No problem. So how do you see the balance between books and fully online learning materials such as micro-lectures with interactive assignments? For example, flipped classrooms, especially now that everything goes by computer screen, it seems books become more absolute.
Right. You know, what I would say is that we don't want the flipped classroom to replace the textbooks. You know, you should see this as a supplement to the textbook. And that's why the beauty of SmartBook, it's a digital textbook. So whatever you're using, they always have access to get onto the digital textbook. Because if you're just having them play around with this, you know, they're guessing, they're seeing the illustrations. But I think it's important to stress that the textbook is the primary source. These are all supplements to that textbook. So I hope I answered the question.
Brilliant. And the next question is, one of the things I'm most concerned about is helping students to navigate the SPSS environment. You know, they get stuck. You pop over to their workstation and notice that they've set a variable to string instead of numeric. You say that you can do anything on Connect that you do in the classroom. The thing I'm most concerned about is helping students navigate the SPSS environment. You know how it is. They can't get a test to work. You nip over to their workstation and see that they've coded a variable as a string instead of a numeric. Do you have any advice on this?
So is the question about technology difficulties when they're taking the test?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, my experience both from my end and the students, the support on McGraw-Hill end is really good. I mean, students, most of them are able to navigate fine. And it's been stressed by all my McGraw-Hill reps that I am not supposed to worry about technology with the students. If anything happens, send them to the help desk, the support desk. They've been really good troubleshooting and getting students where they need to be. Something like exams where it's, you know, higher level and more important that, you know, technology doesn't fail. You can always go in as the instructor. You can see what happened. You can see how long they spent on it. You can erase their score. You can give them another attempt. I know it's not the most ideal, especially if something happens halfway through or at the end. But overall, what I have found very, very minimal technology problems. And if anything, it's on the student's end, not having a good connection. But in the program itself, it's been very, very, very reliable. But I guess to answer your question, there's a lot of support around it, and there's a lot of ways that you as the instructor can go in and edit and fix, reset very quickly.
So we have Heiko who is asking, how could this platform be adopted for peer learning and all have students work in small groups or teams? I'm thinking along the lines of team-based learning pedagogy.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, so how could this platform be adopted for peer learning and or having students working in small groups of teams? I'm thinking along the lines of team learning pedagogy.
Yeah, that would be a little bit of an issue with the team learning doing this. This is a little bit more individualized. What I would say is whatever your school, the online platform, that's where you can use more of the team learning with that, setting up forum boards or discussion boards. That's what I do on Canvas. So I'll have them discussion and interactive so they can discuss with themselves on the online platform. Embedded within Connect, there's not really group work that they can do.
Okay, and Joe is asking, how long would this take to all set up?
How long would it take?
So how long would this take to set up in terms of the actual platform itself?
It really depends on how much you want in there. I mean, your first time setting it up, it's going to take a little bit of work because you have to bring the assignment in and then you have to put point values to it. You have to put the dates on it. Once you get it, though, you just copy it each semester and it brings it over. It just has a new URL. But I would say if you're going to build this thing and put just the basics, reading, smart book, maybe the exams, setting it up, may take a couple hours because, again, if you don't have a test bank, you have to go into the entire test bank. Let's say it's 150 questions. You can either pull them all over or you can go through the questions and decide which ones you want in. So it really depends on how specific you want to get in and manipulate the material. I mean, if you just want to throw together a course, you could do it very quickly. But again, how many assignments do you want in there? Do you have to build the exams? That's why it's helpful to have one person build at least the basics and then send it out to everybody. And then everyone can play around with what they do. That's what I do in my department. Since I'm a little bit more fluid with it, I set it up. And then if somebody wants an assignment, I can add the assignment and send it over to them. So it really depends on how much you're going to put into it. It could take you a couple hours to really build it. But the beauty of it is it's like a new textbook, right? When you get a new textbook, you have to go through your lectures, your PowerPoints, and update everything. Once you get this down, you're just copying it into the next semester. So it's a lot of work in the beginning to set up, but then it's ease from semester to semester.
Okay, and then we have a question from Meander, who's asking, in terms of the resources and learning material within Connect, how much is based on reading only and how much is available in other media like video, audio, infographics, etc.? Students don't all learn as easy with text only.
Yeah, and again, you can tailor that to whatever you want. So if you want to emphasize more of the traditional reading, you can do that. If you want to make it more interactive, you can even make assignments. Now, we all know when you make an assignment optional, most students won't do it. But if you have a couple of students that, say, hey, I don't learn the traditional way, I want more hands-on interactive, you can post it. You can make it optional for the other students. But the students that really learn that way, you can build that piece up. And again, that's the beauty of it. You can put whatever you want in there and assign it as mandatory or optional into your gradebook. But you can customize it based on the students in your class that semester.
Okay, brilliant. And the next question is, was there an implementation service to help you build this for your course?
Well, when I first started using it, my reps were really helpful. Even for this seminar, I had one of the gentlemen, Gary, he set up just the textbook and the course and sent it over to me. And then I started playing around with dropping assignments in and looking at different ways to do it. So my first thing would say, go back to your rep, ask them to, whatever textbook you're using, ask them to set up the course with that textbook. And you can even ask them, I know I have, in the beginning, I'd say, can you show me how to put the Learn Smarts in there, the smart books? Can you put a couple of exams in there for me? And they'll drop it in, and then you can tweak it. So the reps have been tremendous help when I first got this started. And if you have somebody in your department that's really good at this too, we have a couple of our adjuncts that are really good. So sometimes I'll just pair them up with someone and they'll share their course, or they'll show them how to do something that, maybe I haven't mandated, like Quest. Quest just came out. So maybe somebody who's really good with Quest or has used Quest, they can share that with a colleague. And then it just drops right into your course. So tap into, and it could be people from other schools. Tap into people that are using this and have them share assignments or even their course shell with you.
Yeah, I think that's all of the questions that I can see. I don't know if there's any final ones coming through. I'll give it a few seconds if there are, but I think pretty much. No? Any more questions? I don't think we have. Yeah, that's fine. So what I'll do is we'll close now. I'll just hand over to V, who will wrap up the webinar, and then we'll end it from there.
Thank you so much, Rosanna, Andy, and Mike. It was a really great webinar. If anybody has any questions, feel free to message us or just email us, and we'll come back to you and we can collect more questions from you as well. And I just wanted to say that there is a service within our region that helps with setup, and our consultants are happy to help you set up Connect too. So we're always here to support you, and I hope you'll have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.